Education and Cultural Activities of the Croatian Presidency of the Council of the EU. Welcome to Zagreb, welcome to Croatia, and welcome to our press trip. We prepared, you saw in your program, extensive 5 days program.
Thank you very much, Sanjin. Good afternoon, everybody. A warm welcome to Zagreb. I'm very pleased that we have the opportunity to host the Brussels correspondence at the start of the first ever Croatian presidency of the Council of the European Union. I will try to outline major priorities of our program, of most important political dossiers, which will be certainly on our agenda. Then I will be willing also to answer all your questions that you might have. As you have seen, the Croatian presidency of the Council is coming in an extremely interesting and delicate period for the European Union, because there are many processes which are unfolding and they will require our action and our commitment. In terms of the program that we have put forward, there are 4 pillars of this program, and all of them are dedicated to different parts of the European Union policies. The first one is the European Union that develops. That means growth. That means the entire package of the internal EU policies, economy, single market, digital, everything that has to do with the Green Deal activities of the new Commission. And we will try to put emphasis on those policies which have most important and most significant effect on our societies, on our citizens, and on our businesses. The second priority is Europe that connects. We feel that this priority should be highly emphasized, because we still feel, especially in this part of the world, that we need better connections between the member states and also our neighborhood. So whether it concerns the infrastructural projects, whether this concerns energy infrastructure or the digital infrastructure. The third priority is Europe that protects. This is certainly an issue of security in terms of internal EU security, but also the external dimension, where a number of dossiers has been for a while on the agenda of the Commission and the Council and the Parliament, and we would like to create conducive atmosphere to move some of those dossiers forward. The fourth priority is the globally influential Europe, and that is to assert the position of the European Union on the global scene, to use the leverage and the power that we have by being a group of countries that has created an unprecedented and inextricable network of mutual relations and support. And therefore, the activities in this area are also in our focus. There are a number of concrete political issues which will come and unfold in the next 6 months, where we would like to make progress. Issue number 1, certainly, is to finalize the last legal and political acts when it comes to the orderly withdrawal of the United Kingdom. I assume that after the clear results of the UK's election, everything will be done on time on the UK side, so that the General Affairs Council decides, European Parliament gives consent, and the written procedure is finalized until the 31st of January. At the same time, we will embark to work together with the Commission, with Michel Barnier, on the mandate of the negotiating framework for the future relationship between United Kingdom and the European Union. Given that the transition period is only a period of 11 months, we will try to approach this issue in a comprehensive but still a realistic manner, so as to attain the required objectives. The second dossier is the multi-annual financial framework, without doubt the most important, politically speaking, dossier for the future of the Union in the financial perspective 21-27, in the altered circumstances with one big member state and a contributor state leaving. I think the real challenge is how to find the balance between those, let's say, four positions, which I can group into the initial proposal of Juncker's Commission from May 2018, when Günther Oettinger was a budget commissioner, then the position of several member states who are net payers, who are more conservative, more reserved in terms of the total volume of the GNI, the position of the larger group of countries, so-called Friends of Cohesion countries, which would like to have more money for traditional or treaty-based policies, especially the agricultural policy and the cohesion policy, and then finally the fourth position, which is the most ambitious position of the European Parliament when it comes to the total volume of the EU budget for next couple of years, and try to find an adequate balance between those policies which we finance for many years and those challenges which are ahead of us, whether it's security, whether it's migration, climate change, innovation, or other investments which are pertinent to the strategic agenda which the European Council adopted in June and which are also a clear follow-up of the political priorities adopted by the Commission of Ursula von der Leyen. The fourth issue is, of course, the Conference on the Future of Europe, a topic which is, I would say, coming at the right time. I think this is an adequate moment if one big member state, who is also a nuclear power, a permanent member of the Security Council, world champion of free trade, and in many other aspects, influential countries leaving, we need to give ourselves some time to reflect on what does the European Union or the European project as such currently needs to do in order to attract more support among our citizens. I think this is an ambition that we all share. And in this open, inclusive debate where adequate space should be found for all institutions, for national parliaments, for academic circles, media, experts, citizens in general, I think we should form a process that could bring up some useful ideas of how the project will function better and be better understood by our citizens as an added value to our countries, to our states, to the national policies we undertake, rather than perhaps to be perceived by some political forces or some citizens as some sort of a threat. These are the four, I would say, continuous pillars and four major political dossiers which are on the agenda. To mention two elements which are relevant for Croatia, so that you who are dealing with overall European thematics, that you get the glimpse of what is relevant for Croatia, especially if I would put aside for the moment my hat as the Prime Minister of a country presiding over the Council. I would say there are two major pists which are our key next steps in terms of the membership of the European Union. One is the membership of the Schengen area, where Juncker's Commission provided us with a report where they clearly stated, after years of mutual consultations, verifications, missions that were sent here, good absorption of the European Union funds, whether it's the envelope which was entailed in the Croatia's accession treaty back in 2011 when we signed, or 2013 when we joined, of 120 million euros. We absorbed another 150 million euros in order to strengthen the capabilities and train and technical equipment the Croatian police to guard our borders as the external border today, but also tomorrow as the external border of Schengen. The other objective is to join the Eurozone. Croatian government has adopted the strategy for the adoption of the Euro back in May 2018. We have made concrete steps in the dialogue with the EU institutions and especially with the Eurogroup, so that we are, as of July last year, working on the action plan in order to fulfill the necessary criteria to join the exchange rate mechanism too. We have an action plan that has 19 areas 19 measures, 9 policy areas, and 6 institutions working hard in order to fulfill these objectives. So for you, major takeaways: Schengen, Eurozone, and the priorities which I have now suggested. Another aspect for us, which is very important, is the issue of our neighborhood of Southeast Europe. You have seen that we have envisaged in the calendar of the presidency to organize a summit between the heads of state and government of the European Union, and heads of state and government of the countries which are south and eastern of Croatia, Western Balkans or Southeast European countries, however we call them. Why did we choose this? It was a relatively easy choice, because Croatia feels that being one of the countries of this part of Europe, we have a responsibility to promote and support our neighboring countries to continue on the path of reforms and get closer to the European Union. This is a clear political will that is the base of this initiative. Second is a little bit related to the anniversary. Namely, some of you may recall that the first summit of this nature was actually held in Zagreb back in 2000, on the 24th November of 2000, when at the time it was the French presidency initiated President Chirac to hold the summit between 15 EU member states and the 6 countries of the region. This summit opened the European perspective for the countries of Southeast Europe. When we look back, in a span of 20 years, the only country that moved from one side of the table to the other is Croatia. Not only that we have moved to the other side of the table, we have been a member of the European Union now for the 7th year, and we are now presiding over the Council. Our ambition is that we should stop with the practice that existed, unfortunately. There was Zagreb 2000, Thessaloniki 2003, and then we had to wait for 15 years until another summit of that nature was organized by the Bulgarian presidency 2 years ago in May 2018 in Sofia. Therefore, with the summit in Zagreb, we would like to signal to other EU member states that the summits with this part of Europe, who have no other alternative but to finally, when the conditions are ripe, joins also the European Union, that the summits are as an impulse, very important political impulse from the highest level, have a regular and systematic meetings, in our view, at least every 2 years. This is important. We are lucky that Chancellor Merkel has decided in 2014 to organize a so-called Berlin process, which was basically conceived to fill in the void which existed. But this is a format which was very much project connectivity oriented, also with some political aspects, but the element which is different is that in that format you don't have all the members of the European Union. You have just major member states, neighborhood, and then some being included as the time has passed. So we want to help our countries, our neighbors, and support them in their reform process so that they also follow the path of Croatia in the years to come. These are the major issues which I wanted to explain at the beginning, and I'm very willing to listen to and answer to any of your questions. Can I have someone helping me a little bit by dealing with so many gentlemen? Please.
Thank you. It's James Chris from the Telegraph of London. 2 questions, if I may, Prime Minister. Croatia is the last country to have joined the European Union, and you'll be holding the presidency when the first country leaves it. Could I ask you what your thoughts about Brexit are, what your opinion of Brexit is, and secondly, whether you believe a trade deal can be done in 11 months, or whether an extension would be needed?
I was very clear and articulate from the announcement by former Prime Minister Cameron when he said that the referendum will be organized to settle once and for all whether the UK should stay in or leave the European Union. I never thought this was a very bright idea. Why? I think the time has proved how complex and difficult the ramifications of a referendum and its result back in June 2016 were, not only for the United Kingdom, but for all of us. We all basically had to deal. I will just tell you that I started at the meetings of the European Council in October 2016. There was hardly any European Council without us debating the Brexit. So it has taken basically the entire mandate of my premiership, if I may say, that we arrived to this moment when it seems to be likely that the process will be concluded in an orderly fashion on the 31st of January. So I think the time will show whether this was good or not for the citizens of the United Kingdom. I never felt this was a very positive development. But what I now feel is that we could not continue protracting this debate endlessly, and it's better to have clarity for us and for the United Kingdom and to continue cooperating together. When it comes to the future relationship, as I said, and having seen the experience of the conclusion of any agreement that the European Union concludes with different countries in the world, whether they are model agreements or they need to be a little bit unique, this is clearly an unprecedented situation. We never had a situation, and before the Lisbon Treaty, there wasn't even an article in the treaty that envisaged any member leaving the Union. So what I think we should do is to, first of all, in cooperation with Michel Barnier, adopt a negotiating framework which is inclusive, but to approach the negotiations in a realistic manner. That means not to put on a plate too many dossiers which we might not be able to deal with in the adequate time. Whether eventually there will be any request for the prolongation of the transition period, it's a little bit too early to say. But if that happens, I've heard the political announcement so far, there wasn't really a will to do that today, but I can't anticipate what will happen if there is a shortage of time to conclude. What we will do as the presidency, our best to kick off the process the sooner the better, and then I'm sure that also Germany, which will take over the presidency in July, will do their maximum to complete the job.
Please, lady in the third row, red scarf, Valentina, if I'm not mistaken.
Hi, this is Valentina Pop with the Wall Street Journal. My question pertains more to transatlantic relations, and I'm here, Prime Minister. And I wanted to ask you about your views, given that we're now heading into an electoral year in the US. Do you fear that tensions over trade and maybe security matters might spill over, and how do you feel that the EU is prepared to deal with these challenges? Thank you.
The United States is one of the most important partners of the European Union. Most of the member states of the Union are also allies with the United States within NATO. I think we have a very close and important relationship when it comes to trade, when it comes to economic relations, political dialogue, security issues, so on different levels, depending on the size of the member states, I would say also different intensity. We had issues in terms of trade after the trade agreement, which we all worked hard on for many years, which eventually didn't go through. I was a member of the European Parliament at the time. I remember so many debates about it, but I think we should be mature enough and find solutions and avoid trade wars, which are not very fruitful in terms of improving mutual relations, but rather make them complicated occasionally. But I think with the history of our relations, with the important role of the United States in the world, I think there should be a lot of common sense on both sides to come to terms and, despite the elections, as you said, in the United States, continue cooperating with each other.
Let's go here to gentlemen. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Mark Peperkorn, Volkskrant in the Netherlands. When you listed your priorities and the pillars and the proposals, you didn't mention migration. Is this because you think nothing actually will happen the next 6 months, or we will continue the situation as it is now, which means that the proposals are blocked?
I wanted to be short in my introductory speech because I know that when introductory speech is too long, then there is always too little time for questions. But of course, migration is under the third pillar of our priorities, that is security. When I said internal and external security, migration is certainly one of those dossiers which reflects both, because the causes of migration usually happen somewhere around the world where there is instability, where there is poverty, where there are failed states, weak institutions, and other reasons which are actually a trigger for people from other parts of the world, whether it's Africa or Asia predominantly, moving towards the European Union. I would approach this issue from two aspects. Aspect number one is to prevent the illegal migration. I think after the experience of 2015-16, when we witnessed 3 migratory routes, Western Mediterranean, Central Mediterranean, and this Eastern Mediterranean, Western Balkans, we all saw the political consequences. After the fall of Berlin Wall, I can't recall any other event that had so many political repercussions on the architecture and the mood in the member states of the European Union. Nothing has changed or impacted so much the approach of the political parties, governments and citizens on any other issue than this phenomenon which we witnessed in 2015-16. Remembering Croatia at the time when, according to estimates, almost 700,000 people passed on the Eastern Mediterranean, Western Balkans route through parts of our country towards predominantly Western states of the European Union, we wouldn't like to see the repetition of such a scenario. And therefore, what we feel should be done is to strengthen the control of the external borders. From our perspective, that means predominantly border between Greece and Turkey, also, of course, Bulgaria and Turkey, and then again strengthen our own border because of the fact that we have a border which is 1,351 kilometers long, even though if it doesn't seem to be that long at the map. Our border with Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro is actually longer, if you look at the map of Europe, than the Russian and the Finnish border. Is that long? So this is important for you to understand. And I will address this issue immediately because some of you will certainly ask. Some of the EU member states, our neighbors, have opted to erect physical barricades or barbed wires on the border with Croatia. 2 of them, the western and the northern neighbor. We didn't opt for that. Why? 2 reasons. One, we have some natural borders, the river of Danube, predominantly making a border between Croatia and Serbia, except one part which we call the green border. Then the river of Sava, which basically is a frontier between northern part of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia. And then we have a long border with Bosnia and Herzegovina from, let's say, 120 kilometers from Zagreb, where we are now, all the way until Dubrovnik, which is a mountainous or forest area. Since in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have, first of all, it's a neighboring and a friendly country with which we have so many links. We didn't want to do the same as some others did, because we didn't feel it was the right political message for our bilateral relations. And second, on the many parts of this border on the other side are actually Croats, constitutive people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also Croats. So I said that as a Prime Minister of Croatia, I will never opt for building a fence between Croats and Croats, to be very precise, and Bosnia and Herzegovina as such. On the legislative part, we all know that the entire package of Dublin has been in the pipeline for a while. There was no clear agreement for many reasons of this shared or burden sharing on the consequences of the migratory crisis. First entry countries where most of the asylum seekers do want to be countries which are not directly affected neither by the first entry nor by the will of those who enter the EU to go there. This is the key issue. This is a key issue in the European Union. And I think in the months to come and even in the years, we will have to somehow come to terms what is our shared responsibility, what is the level of burden sharing and how we can go forward. I think if we strengthen the control of the external borders, then this internal burden sharing will be a little bit more easier than it is today or than it has been in the debate so far.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Jelena, please, Madam in a third row in a leather jacket. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks very much. Just following up, and I'm sure you're anticipating this question. This is Martina Steves from the New York Times. Croatian police is entering Bosnian territory to deport migrants. They're robbing migrants of clothes and belongings, and they're taking people from Zagreb to the border without checking if they came from Bosnia. They are beating them with batons and or firing bullets to scare them. These are facts that have been recorded by my colleagues and by numerous other journalists, and I'm sure that your government is also aware of them. Can you comment on this behavior by some of your authorities and let us know if you're doing anything to change this? Because it seems to me that the country that's in charge of the presidency should also have the moral, ethical and rule of law standing in order to oversee any reform of migration policy. Thank you.
These words that you said are allegations of people who claim so. What I would like to repeat here that Croatian government has invested into the capabilities of the Croatian border police, and I want to emphasize this. We didn't opt for a barbed wire, we didn't opt for fences, we opted to protect our border by trained border police. That is number one. Second, in all the activities of the border police, we respect the national laws, the international conventions, and the European standards as such. We are absolutely taking into account every humanitarian aspect of this dossier. We do not have evidence of all of these elements which you mentioned, except for the two incidents of shooting, which happened incidentally in the inner parts of the Croatian territory, and both of them were incidental. This was not neither a policy nor intention of the police officers. Every single complaint which we receive is duly and carefully checked by the Croatian police and the Croatian authorities.
Madam, please, in the third row on the left side.
Madame, dans le troisième rang, à gauche, s'il vous plaît. Merci, c'est Griselda Pastor de la radio espagnole C. Est-ce que je peux poser ma question en français?
Bien sûr.
Merci beaucoup. Comme vous savez, l'Espagne a un nouveau gouvernement depuis hier. Il a été possible avec les soutiens de la gauche. Le parti à Madrid est franchement très critique, spécialement parce que ce gouvernement a le soutien dans des partie importante dans l'indépendantisme catalan. J'aimerais savoir si ça vous inquiète comme président temporaire de l'Union, la situation espagnole, et si vous, si vous avez des idées ou peut-être des conseils à donner pour essayer de trouver une stabilité. Est-ce que ce nouveau gouvernement, avec ses soutiens des indépendantistes catalans, pourrait aider à résoudre cette crise catalane qui depuis 10 ans fait partie du débat européen?
Oui. J'ai suivi la situation politique en Espagne. J'ai d'ailleurs félicité mon collègue Sanchez pour son inauguration qui a eu lieu hier, si j'ai bien vu. Vous savez que la position de l'Union européenne en général était unie et constante sur la situation que vous évoquez. Depuis que j'ai assisté à toutes les réunions du Conseil, je n'ai jamais vu ni une initiative pour débat sur la question interne en Espagne, au moins une tentative de discussion ou de conclusion. Ça, il faut savoir. Ce qui est important pour nous, qu'il y ait un dialogue, qu'il y ait une solution que convient à l'Espagne et les citoyens espagnols.
Madam, in I don't know which one, 6th row.
Merci, Madame.
I will bring you microphone.
Voilà, je viens avec le micro pour vous le donner.
Thank you. Susana Fresh, I work for Expresso Portugal here. I have a question on MFF. Even if it's the president of the council that is taking care of it, what's going to be the role of the presidency? Will you be an honest broker, so to say? And what is your position? Do you think that is feasible MFF before the end of February? Do you think that 1.07 that was proposed by the previous presidency, it's a starting point, or is it possible to go beyond that? And you were talking about cohesion and agriculture. So if you want to avoid cuts in these areas, where would you cut? Thank you.
Let me first explain and distinguish the role of the President of the European Council and the country which is now in the role of the Presidency of the Council. So at the highest political level of the Presidents and Prime Ministers, I think it's smart that we have decided in December, and this is the usual practice when we enter the final phase of negotiations on the MFF, that the coordination and the negotiations are actually conducted by Charles Michel. Why? Because he's more neutral than any of us. He now has a role which is clearly a European role with a mandate of all of us from 6 months ago. And I think this is healthy. Our role, of course, is the role which will be very visible, for instance, at the level of the General Affairs Council. The dossier is treated also at the lower levels, not only at the highest level of the EU institutions, and also at the COREPER level. So these negotiations, as well as the bilateral contacts which happen on ministerial or expert level, is a space where Croatia has a role, of course, as an honest broker in the presidency, to work in order to find a solution which will be acceptable to everyone. This is important. When it comes to your referral to the proposal of the Finnish presidency, which was the 1.07 of the GNI, I will just be very succinct. We did not have a proper debate on the MFF during the December European Council. We spent most of the time dealing on the climate issues, on the carbon neutrality 2050. You remember that, you were all following those press conferences. And what we did was to hear the report of, at the time, new Finnish Prime Minister, who reported on what was presented and done by the Finnish presidency. My feeling is that this proposal did not please quite a few of member states, so I don't think we are close of attaining an agreement, and therefore these discrepancies with those who have said we wouldn't like to contribute more, and those who say if we have this clear, ambitious program in the next couple of years, then we should find also the adequate means. From a purely national head, so this is me being free to talk about it because Charles will do the job of negotiation, just to give you a specific situation of Croatia, which I think you need to understand. We are members only for 7 years, and our optics vis-à-vis treaty-based policies, whether it's agriculture, fisheries, rural development or cohesion, certainly cannot be the same one as member states who are in the club for, I would say, 15 or now 16 years or 13 years or 25 years or 39 years or 45 years or even 60. It just can't be the same. Moreover, Croatia has this unique situation. Unlike our neighbors in Central and Eastern Europe, who you will recall profited from the widely open hands of the European community of the post-fall of Berlin War period. The FAR program was started for Poland and Hungary economic reconstruction back in '89, the conclusion of the cooperation agreements, conclusion of the Europe Association agreements, macro-financial assistance, pre-accession assistance, 16 years of adoption of 365 billion euros for the Central and Eastern Europe as of 2004 until 2020. We simply didn't have that. And besides that, Croatia was literally a footnote country in terms of EU-Croatia relations for a decade. So while all the others had what I just mentioned, our relationship with the Union from 1990 to 2000, until the Zagreb summit, could be summarized in several elements. One, political engagement of the EU through the Conference on the Former Yugoslavia. EU observers to observe what? Ceasefire and follow the situation of aggression against Croatia from 91 to 95. Ad hoc political dialogue, never structured, systematic political dialogue. Autonomous trade measures. And that's it. No contractual relations, no pre-accession assistance for 10 years. And this was a void in our development. That's why the logic of our country is the logic of the principle of catching up with Slovenia, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and all the other countries which are close to us, which did not have such a starting point, and gradually elevating the overall development of our regions. Zagreb, where you are now, is the only place in Croatia that is above the average of the development of the different parts of the EU member states. Index is 106. All the others are below. So my optics with the national head is naturally we need at least another financial perspective plus 3 years to absorb the funds and then to arrive in, let's say, at the end of the next decade and say, okay, our country is much better than it was before 1st of July 2013. Therefore, we will do our best that we find a solution where with which everybody can live with, that we do allocate enough funds for the new challenges, but that we do not diminish the envelopes for some of the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, which clearly need some more investments and development compared to those who have passed those days.
Thank you. I must inform you that we have only 5 minutes left. So Prime Minister, maybe 2 more.
Oh, we have 20 minutes left. There are too many.
Okay.
They're not here every day.
Okay,
I'm
good.
okay.
Thank you very much. So the next one goes to the gentleman with scarf in the second row.
Monsieur dans le deuxième rang avec l'écharpe, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Premier, si je peux me permettre une autre question en français. Donc, Hugues Baudouin pour France Info TV et Radio Classique. Vous venez de rencontrer le président de la République française, Emmanuel Macron. J'imagine que vous avez évoqué la question du processus d'élargissement et avec l'Albanie et la Macédoine du Nord. Est-ce que vous avez le sentiment que la position française se rapproche de la position européenne, et est-ce que la compréhension mutuelle sur ce sujet progresse par rapport au sommet qui avait été un peu tendu il y a quelques mois?
D'abord, je voudrais dire que les consultations qu'on a eues hier à Paris étaient très substantielles, amicales, respectueuses. Et aussi, je vois une tendance d'une possibilité de l'évolution de la position française par rapport à ce qui était constaté au mois d'octobre pendant le Conseil européen. Pourquoi? Parce que la nouvelle commission, et notamment le commissaire Várhelyi, qui est commissaire hongrois responsable pour l'élargissement, il est en train de travailler sur un papier qui peut porter une certaine modification de la méthodologie des négociations d'adhésion. Alors c'était ça le point principal du président Macron au mois d'octobre. Ce qu'il a dit, il a dit qu'il faut débureaucratiser la technologie d'adhésion, de le processus de négociation d'adhésion. Alors, si on trouve une solution qui peut améliorer le processus, le rendre plus lisible, plus politique, peut-être on peut contenter certaines réservations qui étaient là du côté de la France. Alors, ce qui était clair, et il a dit ça, il aimerait bien que le sommet de Zagreb soit un succès. Pour le sommet de Zagreb, avoir une étiquette d'un sommet référentiel positif et un succès, il faut qu'on trouve les modalités pour le progrès. Notre position, qui était très claire aussi au mois d'octobre, c'était comme un des pays qui connaît un peu mieux que les autres qu'est-ce que c'est vraiment du point de vue technique la négociation d'adhésion. Moi, je peux dire modestement qu'aucun d'autre de mes collègues n'a pas eu tellement de contacts avec les dossiers techniques que moi. Je me suis occupé des relations entre la Croatie et l'Union pour les dernières 26-27 ans, et notamment les négociations d'adhésion. Alors je sais bien quelle est la technologie et je sais que déjà après la Croatie, les défis pour le Monténégro et pour la Serbie sont déjà beaucoup plus compliqués, beaucoup plus exigeants qu'ils étaient pour la Croatie. La Croatie a négocié 5 ans et 11 mois. 5 ans et 11 mois. Il faut savoir que le Monténégro, ils ont commencé en 2012, Serbie 2014. Monténégro a provisoirement ils ont ouvert 33 chapitres, je crois, et provisoirement clôturé 3. Serbie ouvert 18, provisoirement clôturé 2. Et à partir de 2012 et 2020, il s'agit presque de 8 ans, 2014-2020, déjà 6 ans. Et il n'y a que la moitié du travail qui est achevé. Alors, notre objectif pour Zagreb, c'est que nous disons clairement, votre perspective européenne est claire, les deux considérations qui étaient là, la possibilité de suspendre certains chapitres, il faut le savoir, ça c'est déjà dans le cadre des négociations pour le Monténégro et pour la Serbie. Le principe de réversibilité, il est déjà là. S'il y a un nouveau élément sur un des volets qui est dans le portefeuille de n'importe quel chapitre de négociation d'adhésion, on peut revenir à ce chapitre qui était provisoirement déjà clôturé. Alors, ces deux principes sont déjà là. Est-ce qu'on va faire un petit grouping des différents chapitres qui sont proches l'un à l'autre et faire le processus plus politique et plus concret pour les peuples de nos voisins, ça peut être toujours positif et je dirais c'est le chemin comment surmonter la situation qu'on a vécue au mois d'octobre.
Merci. Let's go left, Jelena, please. Gentleman in the second row, holding hand.
Thank you, Diego Velasquez for the Luxembourger Wort, Luxembourg. Follow up on this question. I think you made it rather clear that the French demands on the enlargement process are actually things that are already there. So would you say that the reform of the enlargement process as demanded by Paris is actually a play on time for a non-decision? And since you said that there was no alternative to accession for the countries of the Western Balkans, are you certain that this position, the way you framed it, is consensual among the 27 EU countries? And a second short question, if I may, in the interviews you gave running up to the presidency, one of the issues you did not name, but named in the interviews was the issue of demography, which is an issue for Croatia, but not only, and since the Croatian Commissioner is also the Commissioner for Demography, immigration seems to be a big issue. You said that Europe should also look at this. And what would it translate policy-wise, I ask myself, except when it comes to budget? What are the policy areas one should look into to answer this challenge? Thank you.
Thank you very much for asking the second question. Just to be precise on the enlargement, the possibility of suspending and coming back to the already provisionally closed chapters were just two elements which were echoed at the time as a preoccupation. But the actual position of France, as in many other dossiers and occasions, is always more of a conceptual nature. This is a conceptual question. Because unlike some other countries which had reservations, they had concrete reservations in terms of fulfillment of the criteria of the two countries concerned in certain policy areas. So it was a different approach. Here, we had an approach whether the way that we have so far organized and conducted the enlargement negotiations is good enough. Why? What is the underlying issue? The underlying issue is actually the functioning of the Union as such. And I spent 5 years in Paris. If there is one thing I know well, I know how big member states feel about the enlargement without end, bringing more countries and making the entire decision-making procedure more cumbersome. And then you look at the budget debate, which are all now in parallel. So you have the budget debate, you have the enlargement debate, you have the Conference on the Future of Europe debate. They're all very much interlinked, including the issue of migration. When we look at the countries who are most reticent vis-à-vis further enlargement, look at their policy on migration, somehow you will find the convergence very quickly. When it comes to demography, for us, and not only for us, it is one of the essential policy questions. I said to the interview on one of the international newspapers recently that Croatia every year, due to the negative natural growth, that is to say that we have unfortunately 15 or 16,000, depends on the year, more people who pass away rather than the newborns. We lose a small city of 15 or 16,000 people per year. If you are a nation and a country of only 4 million people, this is an issue that raises not only eyebrows, but it requires some policy recipes and activity. My government has done a series of policies in different areas, not only on tax issues, but also on childcare, on support for mothers, fathers, a series of investments in kindergarten, schools, everything that will create a more conducive climate for our young families to have more children. We still need to do a lot. And when I raised this issue, it was in Sibiu, at the European Council in Romania. Without any prior extra consultations, several of the colleagues said, that's true, we have the same problem. We very much understand what are the EU competencies, mixed competencies, and the competencies of the member states. This is clearly competence of a member state. But if we have in Europe a problem which, in our view, is not only a demographic one, because why am I raising this at the European level? I will tell you very simply. For instance, Slavonia, which is the eastern part of Croatia from, let's say, few kilometers of Zagreb towards the east and then towards Danube towards Serbia. You have a plain area, agricultural area, very nice countryside, but I have two elements. I have negative natural growth and I have one of the four liberties, column vertebral of the European Union, free movement of people, meaning that Croats do not require anymore no work permits, no quotas to have fully recognize their qualifications anywhere in the EU member states and then simply say, okay, now I will see what are my chances in a different labor market in a different member state. And if I have this cocktail of negative demographics and free movement, then all of a sudden I have a lack of people. And therefore, our objective was, and when I raised it, and then later when we talked to Ursula von der Leyen, we agreed immediately. She had a quick positive reaction because she was not only Minister of Defense, she was also Minister of Social and Family Affairs, and she did undertake some policy in Germany on this, and she had a lot of, I would say, sensibility for these concerns, and therefore I'm very pleased that the Croatian Commissioner, Vice President Dubravka Šuica, has two topics, democracy, demography, and the Conference on the Future of Europe. That's her portfolio. So our idea was essentially that what she could do is to see the trends of depopulation, movement from rural to urban areas, movement from more developed, from less developed EU member states to more developed EU member states, and how to see the catalogue of policies which have worked on this issue in some of the countries and actually produced a change, a success, an alteration of trends, and then that 5 years later, here you go, these are the tools which you could do in order to address the problem, which is really of a substantial nature. This is the whole background, this is the idea. So it's much more than the tax policy.
Thank you. Let's go to the back.
Merci. Maintenant, allons vers le fond de la salle.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm from Bloomberg News. Can I ask you to clarify something you said earlier on Brexit in response to a colleague's question? You talked about the need for both sides to be realistic and for the negotiating mandate of the EU to be inclusive. That sounds a little contradictory. Are you saying that fewer topics should be included, or the whole thing should be thrown into the basket and then worked out during the course of the transition period? Could please be more precise?
I'm just being very realistic. I think if we are responsible, then we will have a comprehensive and inclusive negotiating framework, because there are many areas already envisaged in the declaration on the future relationship. What are the elements that we should embark on negotiating? At the same time, if we have literally only 11 months, we just discussed how long accession negotiations are lasting for some of the member states. I remember when we were concluding a relatively easy stabilization and association agreement, how much time it took for us, and it was certainly more than 11 months. I'm being very realistic. I mean, you don't have to be a magician to understand if you need to concert on the side of the 27, you have the UK, you have no precedent, there was a divorce, all of a sudden we need to see how we will continue working and cooperating. I'm just saying that in this aspect we need to be realistic in understanding how much time we have ahead of us. If we want to conclude, if we would know in advance that the request for a prolongation would not be a political problem, then things are certainly different. But this is something I can't tell at this stage.
Thank you. Yeah. Gentleman in red tie, please.
Thank you very much. Thomas Miglierina, Swiss Television. I noticed with pleasure that you managed to put a short paragraph on Switzerland in the program of the presidency on the relations between Switzerland and the European Union. There may be, in fact, trouble ahead because in May there is yet another attempt to cancel freedom of movement of people. Let me ask you a bit provocatively. You are one of the most affected countries by the exodus of people from Croatia to the rest of Europe. Are you sure that freedom of movement of persons is good for you? Do you care about it? And more in general, will you engage in this definitely smaller but still complicated dossier? Thank you very much.
Well, I was twice in the position to speak with the Swiss leaders on this in Zagreb recently, and at the beginning of last year, I think it was at the margins of the 49th Davos World Economic Forum. And I'm fully aware of the dossier, I know what are the issues at stake, and we seem to be in a complicated situation. We will try to provide a correct input if we can move forward so that both sides are pleased, which doesn't seem to be very easy. When it comes to the freedom of movement, freedom of movement is one of the bases of the European project. This is key. This is what makes the whole European Union. When we wanted to join, when we were selling or explaining to the Croatian people what is the European Union, what are the 4 freedoms, we always emphasized freedom of movement. We saw it as a possibility for our citizens to do something which would not be moving from Croatia to one member state, but perhaps going and studying and working for a while and then coming back. We want this to be a reversible process. We don't want to see Croats in the 21st century living in a country which is democratic, which has, in our mandate of the government, very solid economic results, more solidarity in the society, never stronger international or European position, to be choosing to go and live somewhere else. What we need is some time to elevate our living standards as they are in the more developed countries. That's why cohesion policy is important. If in Zagreb, for instance, today, average salary is 1,000 euros. In Zagreb. For the rest of Croatia is around 900 euros. We have elevated, in our mandate, minimal salary. We have elevated median salary, average salary, as I said. We have a healthy economic growth. We are diminishing public debt more rapidly than any other member states. In 2015, it was 85% of the GDP. Now we will be, I think, as I hear the estimates of my colleagues in the Ministry of Finance, around 71.5. Our ambition is to be in 2022 around 62%. This is the last element, even in plain numbers when it comes to percentage of the Maastricht criteria. So what we are trying to do is to use the EU membership to elevate the economic and social standards of our citizens. Whether we can do it fast enough so that less people will use the freedom of movement, this is something which is at stake. That's why I want to also address the issue of demography, because in a cocktail they are complicated to deal with. But I'm not against it personally, to be against the philosophy of everything we have done so far. The other countries of Central and Eastern Europe more or less had the same situation. Look at the numbers in Poland, look at the numbers in Lithuania, Romania, to mention a few. And I also hear from my colleagues that there are also some people who are coming back after several years. So I think these trends will stabilize and even diminish in the time ahead of us.
Prime Minister, we are in the 18th of those 20 minutes you gave us. Are we taking the last one or the penultimate? So the penultimate question, please, goes to the lady in the last row.
Oui, bonjour, Virginie Malingre du Monde. Je voudrais revenir sur le Brexit. J'ai 2 questions liées au Brexit. La première, si j'ai bien compris ce que vous disiez et ce qu'a également dit Madame von der Leyen à Londres aujourd'hui, c'est qu'on ne pourra pas négocier la relation future, là je parle que de la relation future, de manière exhaustive, parce qu'11 mois, c'est pas suffisant. Donc ça veut donc dire quand même qu'il y aura des prolongations finalement. Et deuxième question, je voudrais savoir quels sont les dossiers qui vous semblent prioritaires, sur lesquels il faut absolument parvenir à un accord avant décembre 2020, dans cette période impartie de 11 mois.
Alors, je crois ici qu'il y a question sur commerce, bien sûr, ça c'est très important. Question de pêche, très important pour certains pays, pas pour nous, parce que je n'ai pas vu tellement de navires britanniques dans l'Adriatique, mais pour les pêcheurs français, c'est quelque chose de plutôt important. Alors, je crois qu'il y a une liste des différents chapitres sur lequel on a déjà discuté avec Michel Barnier, mais je vois que les débats maintenant sur le mandat de négociation, il semble ouvert. Alors je ne voudrais pas expressis verbis dire quelques autres volets, sauf ceux deux, qui me semblent très importants pour achever le level playing field pour nos sociétés et nos citoyens.
Thank you. So we have come to an end. This is the last question. Please, gentlemen.
Prime Minister Jacopo Ragazzi from Politico. You said twice, you talked twice about the fact that during the migration crisis you didn't do what other governments did. And so since that now there is a decision in your party where you actually in the EPP about Viktor Orban, and since in your party you play a role quite big, I mean you were one of the two mediators for the position of the top jobs. Do you think that there is space within your party for positions like the position of Fidesz?
I answered this question a month and a half ago. You remember that the EPP held its statutory and the Congress here in Zagreb, where we elected the new leadership, and Donald Tusk moved from the European Council to Rue de Commerce. And the position is very simple. We agreed several months ago at the level of the political assembly of the EPP that the group of wise men headed by Herman Van Rompuy, former Belgian Prime Minister and the President of the European Council, will bring us a report in respect to the three areas which were identified jointly as important to make progress. Once he comes with this report, we will be making new decisions on this dossier. This will also depend on what Fidesz would like to do as well. It's not only us, but it's also their future planning.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We had many more hands up in the air. Can we go on for a few more minutes?
Yes, until 5:30.
5:30. Thank you very much.
This will be positively echoed in their reports.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, gentlemen, the first one.
Bruno Waterfield, Times of London. Again, on Brexit, one of the decisions that will have to be taken during your presidencies on the question of financial services and equivalence. It might be about the basis of a new equivalence plus, or the assessments, technical assessments, on the basis of existing equivalence rules. Now, we know from Switzerland that the Council and the Commission decided to use the equivalence issue not just as a technical one of assessments on 26 criteria, etc., but as a political leverage in wider trade framework discussions. Now, do you envisage equivalence being used as a political lever, a weapon even, in those talks, because that decision is going to have to be taken very soon?
I wouldn't go into the vocabulary of weapons, but what I have learned in the European and international negotiations that all arguments and considerations eventually are being treated as political, but we have not come to the final decision on the equivalence.
Merci. Oliver Kim du journal autrichien Die Presse. Très brièvement, comment envisagez-vous de résoudre le conflit frontalier entre la Croatie et la Slovénie? Et deuxièmement, pourquoi l'accord entre l'Union européenne et la Turquie a-t-il échoué de garantir cette sécurisation de la frontière entre la Grèce et la Turquie? Faut-il un nouveau accord avec les Turcs? Merci.
Par rapport aux relations entre la Croatie et la Slovénie, d'abord, je voudrais insister que la Slovénie est notre voisin, l'unique pays avec lequel dans l'histoire on n'a jamais eu ni de conflit ni de problème. Toutes les questions ouvertes entre la Slovénie et la Croatie sont les questions résiduelles de la dissolution de l'ancienne Yougoslavie. Alors, c'est-à-dire le processus qui s'est achevé entre 90 et 91 et finalement avec la reconnaissance internationale de deux pays fini à 92. Nous avons les différents frontaliers, nous avons des questions ouvertes du côté de la frontière terrestre, mais aussi de la frontière maritime. Vous êtes tous, j'imagine, au courant avec les briefings qu'après des années de différentes tentatives, en 2009, après le blocage de la Slovénie, de 13 chapitres pendant la période quand la Croatie a négocié son adhésion, 13 chapitres, je me souviens, le premier semestre de 2009, il y avait la présidence tchèque, on n'a ni ouvert, ni provisoirement clôturé aucun des chapitres. Même si certains chapitres étaient prêts pour la fermeture. Pourquoi j'insiste sur ça? Parce qu'on a perdu, grâce à ce dossier bilatéral, selon nous, pas mal de temps pendant les négociations d'adhésion. La solution pour sortir de cette impasse était une décision de deux pays, avec le soutien de l'Union européenne, mais aussi des États-Unis, d'aller devant un arbitrage ad hoc. Cet arbitrage ad hoc a travaillé. Malheureusement, il y avait une compromission, si je peux le dire, du processus, parce qu'il y avait une collusion entre l'arbitre qui était nommé dans le Conseil des arbitres slovène et l'agent qui représentait l'État slovène. Alors quelque chose qui n'est ni pas prévu, ni normal, ni correct, ni le respect de l'État de droit. Et la Croatie a pris la décision pendant l'été 2015 de partir ou de laisser ce processus d'arbitrage. Malheureusement, le Conseil arbitral a continué de travailler. Alors ils ont pris leurs propres décisions sans Croatie présent et sans aucun représentant juridique de la Croatie dans ce processus. Une fois la décision était prise, c'était le mois de juin 2017, je crois. 2017. Nous avons constaté que cette décision n'est pas acceptable pour la Croatie grâce aux faits qui se sont passés pendant 2015. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé après? La Slovénie tient la position qu'il faut respecter et mettre en œuvre cette décision. Nous disons que cette décision ne peut pas être valide parce que d'abord, on a sorti, deuxième, il y avait un compromittage de ce processus. La Slovénie a initié une procédure juridique contre la Croatie devant le Cour européen à Luxembourg. Cette procédure est toujours en train d'être délibérée. Nous attendons la décision de ce cours. Il faut bien noter que ce que la Croatie a dit, ce qu'on a soumis devant le cours, c'était que le cours européen n'était pas compétent pour la question qui, selon nous, ce n'est pas une question de droit européen ni de l'acquis communautaire, mais plutôt un différend frontalier qui doit être réglé par les règles de droit international. Et ça, c'est notre position. En même temps, j'ai exprimé plusieurs fois notre volonté et notre disponibilité pour parler, négocier avec nos voisins à Ljubljana et trouver une solution politique avec laquelle on peut vivre et être content tous les deux. Ça, c'est important. Alors, il y a une volonté politique claire. Et plus de ça, certaines parmi vous ici, qui sont des Croates, mais correspondants de différents médias étrangers ici en Croatie, savent que pendant tout le mandat de mon gouvernement, et ça c'est déjà 3 ans et 3 mois, on n'a jamais eu un maîtrisage de ce dossier d'une manière si sereine, sans hystérie, sans aucune exaltation, qui avant, sur le dossier relation Croatie-Slovénie, toujours a causé des problèmes politiques et médiatiques d'une manière incroyable. Alors nous, on est très confiants que finalement, il faut qu'on s'assoie et qu'on trouve une solution avec laquelle tous les deux pays et deux peuples peuvent continuer à vivre un à côté de l'autre sans grand souci, parce qu'il ne s'agit pas de tellement grands problèmes comme peut-être parfois il semble. Ah, la Turquie. Sur la Turquie, la position de la Croatie est assez claire. Moi, je trouve qu'un type d'arrangement avec la Turquie doit être trouvé. Est-ce que ça serait le même type d'arrangement comme avant, il y a quelques années, ou quelque chose proche à ça? C'est pour nous la garantie que la répétition de 2015-2016 ne va pas se passer.
It's 5:29, so the last question, please, goes to Jelena, please. Lady in the third row.
Hvala. Petra von Wilsdorf, Sovjetska tiskovna agencija STA. Postavit ću pitanje na hrvatskom.
Možete i na slovenskom, šta? Možete i na slovenskom. Ja sam u Ljubljani uvijek odgovarao na slovenskom.
Naglasili ste cilj ulaska Hrvatske u Schengen i cilj ulaska Hrvatske u euro. Pa me zanima da li možete biti malo konkretniji kad bi po vašim ocenima Hrvatska realno mogla ući u Schengen i u euro. I oko Schengena, da li mislite da je Schengen spreman za proširenje i kakav način, mislim, što očekujete? Paket? Hrvatska, Rumunjska, Bugarska ili što? I da li mislite da nije najbitnije sada implementirati azilnu reformu i kad imamo granice u samom Schengenu, možda Schengen nije ni spreman za proširenje?
Da. Što ću ja sad na hrvatskom da odgovaram? Would you like me to answer in English or in Croatian? English, it's easier. So, first of all, compliments for your Croatian, even though I do fully understand Slovenian. On Schengen, it's very difficult to predict the dates. I will tell you a story when I was much younger and when a number of people who were working on the Croatian road towards the EU started to estimate when was going to be the date that we will finally enter. So we started with our crystal ball and the predictions. It's 2006, 100%. Then it was 2007, and then it was 2008, and 9, and 10, and 11, and 12, and all of a sudden the crystal ball told us it was going to be the 1st of July 2013. So with that experience, and even a personal one, I've started to refrain from any comments on guesses actually on when a certain accession of Croatia to Schengen or to Eurozone might really happen. Why? Because of the experience. Second, because of predominantly contextual reasons. You are right. Schengen that we want to join is the original one, rather than the Schengen that has internal borders between the member states who almost forgot how it was to see a policeman at the border. And that's why the entire issue is linked with the dossier of migration. The issue is linked how we will tackle the legislative pieces that I answered earlier ago to your colleague. The dossier is linked on how much time two of the member states who are, let's say, in terms of order, technically ahead of us, but in terms of the point of view of the Commission in the same position. So now after the Juncker Commission has come out with the report, Commissioner Avramopoulos, who visited us here, we are, let's say, technically at a similar stage. But they've been waiting for the positive decision of the Council for a while. Unlike Bulgaria and Romania, Croatia does not have, you will remember, the so-called cooperation and verification mechanism, a special tool which was envisaged in the accession treaties of those two countries back when they joined 2007, but of course negotiated before. We don't have such a mechanism. And I know what Schengen means for Bulgaria, I know what Schengen means for Romania, I know how many times I've heard it being raised at the different fora and different levels of the Council. We will, of course, insist on that objective, but I know that it will not only be a dossier which will be exclusively regarded on the proper merits of our own case. The debate on Schengen is a bit wider, as I said, and we understand that. So we will do everything we can in those areas where we can really influence the strength of our dossier and the adequate decision of the Council, and we will try to work with others to come to terms with wider functioning of the Schengen Dublin package, burden sharing on migration, and of course Bulgaria and Romania, who are similar but different as well in this exercise. This is when it comes to Schengen.
Now we have really come to an end. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for intro remarks. Thank you for this Q&A session. Now, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I invite you to join him and we all go to the main plenary room of the Euro-Croatian presidency. We go back, we go out, and then we turn left.
You haven't showed them the...
No, we didn't have time yet. So please join us. We are going to a guided tour.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your stay in Zagreb. We'll see each other now for a minute. And tomorrow.